Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Season Screamings. It's that time of year when we gather on the couch in front of the roaring fire and watch our favorite holiday movies. Christmas Vacation, Die Hard, and of course, Gremlins.
Yeah.
Speaking of Gremlins, here's a few you definitely don't want to feed after midnight. Please welcome to the stage Bloody Disgusting's Boo Crew podcast, Trevor Shang, Lauren Shang, and Leo D'Antonio.
Check, check, check.
Season Screamings, everyone. Happy holidays.
My name is Trevor.
I'm Lauren.
I'm Leo.
And we are Bloody Disgusting's Boo Crew podcast. So we're their flagship interview podcast. And you can also check us out everywhere you get your podcasts and on BDTV, which is now streaming on Roku, Screenbox, and a bunch of other cool places. You can see a video version of the podcast. So today, enough about us. Joining us on the Season Screaming stage is an award-winning actor and director whose charm, talent, and likability, mixed with an extraordinary sense of comedic timing, as well as being a gifted dramatic performer, has made him transcend the screen and into pop culture itself. His debut feature role was in Joe Dante, Steven Spielberg, and Chris Columbus's iconic Gremlins in 1984. He followed that up with projects including Opposite Molly Ringwald and River Phoenix and Surviving before heading to Broadway on behest of the world's most successful playwright, Neil Simon, in the Tony Award-winning Blocks of Blues. He gave us arguably one of the most fun horror films ever made in Waxwork. Returned to the role of Billy Peltzer in Gremlins 2 that made an indelible mark on cinema through its wild inventiveness and game-changing special effects. He has since gone on to over 76 filmed credits, made up of the most celebrated movie and TV projects of all time, from Tales from the Crypt to Law & Order, Seventh Heaven to Star Trek, and the Hatchet franchise, and it continues that trajectory to this day, most recently in the unprecedented 23-time award-winning horror indie Bad Candy that just came out. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the legendary Zach Galligan.
Is that introduction for me? I don't know. I'm like, who's this guy talking about? I don't even recognize who this guy's talking about. Kids,
Gizmo!
Yeah, kids, whoa. We don't want that too close. Put that down there, just a little far away from this gentleman here. Come on, buddy.
Zach, welcome, man.
Thanks for having me.
We're huge fans of yours, everybody in this room, so take us just back to the beginning before we get into Gremlins on just your discovery of the acting bug and how you got into the whole thing.
Wow. Well, let's see. So, starting around when I was maybe 5 or 6, I would do the sort of school plays. And sometimes I would just get put in them. I wasn't even really trying to, be in them. So I think the first thing I did was, a play about whaling, like whaling ships. And
right.
The captain of the whaling ship.
Ambitious play.
It was an ambitious play. We had all sorts of blocks on the ground, the blocks that you built stuff with, and we made a little makeshift ship of it, and I was the captain of the ship. Luckily, I booked the lead on the first go-around, so that was a good sign. And I think I had one line, there was mostly narration. They were like, and so they came close to the whales, and the ship was getting closer to the great white whale, or something like that. And I had to stand up and go, hang on, boys, get ready for a Nantucket sleigh ride, which is what happens when you harpoon the whale and it takes your boat with you. They call it a Nantucket sleigh ride. So that was my first line ever in a play. I think it was kindergarten or first grade, something like that. And then I did school plays for years, and then I went to summer camp in upstate New York. I did plays there. And so I was just doing a lot of theater, and I was doing all the typical theater that you would imagine. I was doing Danny Zuko in Grease. Hey, that's my name, don't wear it out. And Jesus and Godspell, and Pippin, all of the late 70s, early 80s kind of plays and musicals that you would expect to do. And one day I was sitting in my lunchroom, and my drama teacher, whose name was Dr. Blake Leach, comes up to me and he goes,
Zach, I would just like to introduce you to this woman. She's very interested in meeting you. She's heard very, very good things about what you do on stage.
He was a very, he was a very, very serious drama teacher. And so he took me over and he introduced me to this woman named Julia Taylor. And I didn't know it at the time, because I didn't know anything, that she was arguably the most powerful casting director in New York City, which is where I'm born and raised, and I was in Manhattan at the time. And so she was like, hi, so I hear you like acting and this and that. So I came in and I auditioned for a movie called No Small Affair. Now, No Small Affair, there was 2 attempts at it. The first attempt was with Matthew Broderick, who eventually beat me out for the part, and Sally Field. It was directed by a director named Martin Ritt. And he actually, unfortunately, had like a heart attack on the set, so they had to shut down production. So they shut down the movie and did it again in 1985 with John Cryer and Demi Moore, and that one is the one you can rent at the video vault now when you go there. Oh my gosh, dated myself renting stuff at video. What's a DVD? So you can go and you can see that movie wherever you can get it, on streaming networks everywhere. So I tried out for that, but I didn't get it. But she took a Polaroid picture of me, and she stapled it to a piece of cardboard, like the kind of cardboard you get when you get a shirt back from the laundry. You know, that like makes the shirt all stiff and everything like that. She wrote my vital statistics on it, and she put it, she told me later, she put it in her cabinet, like file cabinet of people who like aren't professional actors, because I didn't have any representation. I didn't have an 8x10, I didn't have anything. So about 10 months later, I'm at my girlfriend's house up in Scarsdale, and I get a phone call, and it's like, Julia Taylor would like to see you again. I'm like, who's Julia Taylor? They're like, the casting director wanted to see you for No Small Affair. Oh, right, yeah. Oh my gosh, she wants to see me again? Well, it turns out she opened her file cabinet, started going through things, and she's like, oh yeah, he was pretty good when he tried out for No Small Affair. So they were doing this movie called Tempest, which is a modern kind of updating, you know, of Shakespeare's The Tempest, with John Cassavetes, Jenna Rollins, Raul Julia, and Susan Sarandon. And John Cassavetes is going to direct it. Now, incredibly, even though I wasn't really into acting or wanting to be an actor, I was a huge movie buff. So I knew who all these people were. I knew who John Cassavetes was from The Dirty Dozen. I knew who Susan Sarandon was from Rocky Horror Picture Show, etc. So they brought me in to try out, and my very first audition for this project, and probably second audition in my life, I walk in, there's Paul Mazursky, the director, and Susan Sarandon sitting there. And I'm like, what is happening to me? And they're like, we'd like to read with a number of actresses if if that seems like fun for you. And I was like, well, can I read with this actress right here? Susan Sarandon, like, yeah, no, we mean more your age. To see if you have any chemistry with them. And I'm like, sure. So the first person they brought in was Phoebe Cates. And this is like the most legendarily astounding looking person you ever seen in your life. And I was like, I think I like this profession. She walks in, she's like, hi. So I read with her, read with a few other people, still didn't get it. Went up probably 4 or 5 more times, still didn't get it. Finally, Julia Taylor calls me up and she says, look, you came really, really close. In fact, it came down to you and the guy who's eventually going to get it, Sam Robards. And I said, oh wow, that's really disappointing because the whole process eventually took 4 or 5 auditions in probably about 3 or 4 weeks. I thought for sure I was going to get it. When you're 17, you're like, I got this. You're so confident. She's like, you didn't get it, but I really think that if you got more auditions, you could probably book something. And I said, well, how do I get more auditions? She said, well, you get an agent. And I said, what's an agent? She said, that's a guy who gets you auditions. I said, well, how do I get an agent? I'm just trying to figure everything out. She goes, well, normally it's very, very difficult, but I'm going to make it easier for you. Can you put your mom on the phone? My mom's standing next to me and she's like, hello? Yes? Yes, I see. Interesting. I understand. She hands me the phone back and she says, you got 1 year. And walks out of the room. And I get on the phone. She's like, take down the pen and pencil. I'm going to give you some appointments for agents, and you can go and meet them and see which one you like. So I went out, and I didn't know it at the time, but I met the 3 biggest agents in Manhattan. I picked the one that I like, and I got represented. And that's how I started my career as an actor.
Unbelievable. Wow. So, as a huge film buff, obviously at that time, E.T. had come out, Jaws had come out.
Well, not when I was 17, but the Raiders had.
Sure.
Yeah, and Close Encounters and Jaws and sure.
And so the script is written by Chris Columbus, which is his second feature. He had done a movie called Reckless at the time, and this was his next movie. Was this script that Steven Spielberg bought because he said it was the most original thing he'd ever read, and that was the script for Gremlins. And they got Joe Dante to direct it from his work in The Howling. And you find out about this project somehow. How did it go with the audition process for Gremlins?
Well, I actually have to ever so slightly correct my introduction. When I got the agent, the first feature that I did actually was a very, very strange and unreleased movie called Nothing Lasts Forever. And Nothing Lasts Forever, I thought was going to be my big breakthrough because it was all the SNL people. It was produced by Lorne Michaels. It was directed by Tom Schiller, who did the black and white movies Schiller's Reel. And it was going to star John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray in cameos. And so I booked that part, and I was like, oh my God, I'm working with Belushi and Murray and Aykroyd. I was like, this is unbelievable. And then John Belushi passed away in March of that year, a month before we started shooting. So I ended up working with Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and shooting the movie at 18. It was actually my senior project at high school. It was an MGM feature. And my schoolmates were like, that's so unfair, you know? So they wanted to be happy for me, but they were so bummed. They were just so envious and like whatever. So anyway, so I did that movie. So that's kind of got me on like the list of like people, sort of up and coming people. So after I did that movie and I got on sort of like the casting directors, like this is one of the guys that we should see first list. I would started going up for all sorts of things and came very close. Like there are all sorts of movies that I find difficult to watch today because I almost got them, like War Games. You know, Matthew Broderick. Here we go again. You know, Broderick was my nemesis for a long time.
So you ended up replacing him in Bill Ixley Blues, right?
I ended up replacing. Well, first, this is the crazy thing. I got super close for Brighton Beach Memoirs. And then he got it, and they offered me the understudy for Brighton Beach Memoirs. And I went like this, I ain't understudying nobody. I was just like all 17 and super cocky. I was like, who needs Broadway? You know what I mean? It was like, if you look back, it was absolutely insane that I would think this way. So I actually had one meeting where Emmanuel Azenberg, who was the producer of Brighton Beach Memoirs, and Gene Sachs, the director, sat down with me at some deli somewhere and begged me. They were like, please, please, I want you to reconsider and come and do the understudy for Matthew in Bright Beach Memoirs. And I was like, can you guarantee that I will have at least one performance of Bright Beach Memoirs on Broadway? Or will I just understudy? Like, is there a chance that I'll never actually do the play? And they looked at each other, because they're very honest people, and they were like, we can't guarantee that. I'm like, I'm out. I can't do the play. I'm not doing it. And then the next week, I booked Gremlins, and I was like, see? I mean, you look back at some of the insane things I did when I was just this cocky 17-year-old, because you get success early and you're like, I can do this is no problem. You know, you just have this, you're a kid, you have no idea what you're doing, you have no perspective, you have no idea how difficult the business is. It's just coming to you so quickly and so naturally, you figure it's just never gonna end. So, yeah, I don't even know where I am now. Where am I?
You're Gremlins. You got Gremlins, and you had to audition.
So I got Gremlins, and I had to audition, but that just basically came about because once I had done Nothing Lasts Forever, I was just being called in for everything. So I didn't get War Games, didn't get, you know, Breakfast Club, didn't get, you know, a bunch of the movies. There were Outsiders, didn't get that. You know, came very, very close to things, but just ended up not getting them. And then Gremlins came along, and I always, from the second that I got the audition sides, because I didn't get the script, I got no, they wouldn't show me anything, wouldn't show anybody anything, except the the scene where I asked Phoebe out on a date, because that really doesn't have anything to do with Gremlins or Mogwai or this guy or anything like that. So it was just a like, hey, would you like to, go out and have dinner with me type of scene. So I went in the first time and I read for the casting director. She was like, great. I went in the second time to meet Joe Dante and Mike Fennell, who was like the actual sort of producer, nuts and bolts producer of the movie. Steven Spielberg's more the executive producer. He was sort of going like, I'll make this casting directions and I'll fix the script here and I'll oversee things, but basically you guys go do it, And I went in to meet Joe Dante and Mike Fennell, and Joe Dante wasn't there because he hates flying and was like plane sick. So I just met Mike Fennell and read for him, and he was like, that's great, we come with a mix and match session. And I was like, you mean like where I read with actresses to determine if we have any chemistry? And he's like, yeah, that's great, we're going to do that on Thursday. I said, that's good because I'm going down to Fort Lauderdale for spring break on Friday. So it works out perfectly. So I went in, and who do they pair me with for the mix and match session? Phoebe Cates. So it's exactly like 2 years earlier at Tempest, and I see her and I go, hey. She goes, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, how have you been? I'm like, great. And if possible, she's pretty. And she has her hair back in a ponytail, they're chewing gum, she's wearing her newfangled sneakers I'd never heard of before called Reeboks. and she's just like super cutting edge and adorable and just the prettiest thing. And by this point, she's been on the cover of 17 magazine and Fast Times. Everybody knows who she is. Drop dead gorgeous at 19, and I'm like, wow, I'm thinking to myself, wow, I hope we get paired together. And she looks at me and she goes, I hope we get paired together. And I'm like, I was just thinking the same thing. She's like, you want to read together? So if we get paired together, we'll be prepared? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I started reading with her, we get through it once, and she's really good, and I have a couple of choices I think are kind of good. And we get halfway through the second reading, and Susan Arnold, the casting director, sticks her head out of the office door, and she goes, Zach, Phoebe, which means like she's calling us in together. So we're like, I guess we're auditioning together. Score, because we just rehearsed together. So we go in, and back then you got to remember, you're talking March 1983 technology. So they have a video camera. It's like on a massive tripod, and it's this gigantic creature, you know what I mean? And the cables going down into this VCR type thing with these huge capes that they put in and everything. That's not like, here's my phone and I'm gonna, So they have Phoebe and I stand in front of this screen. I don't know what it was for, but I guess just a kind of a blank background. So we start doing the scene, like, hey, how come you don't like Christmas? What am I, a leper or something? If you don't like Christmas, it's everything you see in the movie. So we're doing that scene, and I get down to the point where I ask her out for a date, and I was really happy with this choice that I came up with. It's in the movie where I'm expecting her to say no, and then she says yes. And so I act super surprised, and then I have to Fonz out and be like super, hey, it's Danny Zuko, of course you're going to say yes, kind of thing like that. So I'm like, really, that's great, oh wow. Well, we can talk about it later and just smooth all the details out and everything like that and try to get cool. So that worked very well, and we were happy with it, and the scene's over, and I look over at Joe Dante, who's standing behind the enormous, videotape contraption, and I wait for him to call cut. And he doesn't call cut. I don't know what to do. I know one thing: you don't say, "Can we stop?" As an actor, you just keep going. So I look at Phoebe, and I probably say something like, "It's cold out, huh?" And she's like, "Yeah, it sure is." More silence. Wow, it's a nice small town, isn't it? Yep, it's great. It's pretty small. They're ad-libbing. It's not really going anywhere, so I didn't know what to do. Since she was right here. My head on her shoulder, and I sighed, and I went, and I looked straight at the camera, like, look how lucky I am being with the world's most beautiful woman, and I have no idea what to say next, and I give up, and I'm in love with her, and can we stop this? And apparently, when I asked Joe Dante, I was like, hey, can you tell me how I got the part? Because whatever it is that I'm doing right, I want to do it more, so I get more parts. And he goes, well, apparently what happened, Joe has a kind of squeaky voice, he goes, what happened was, we were looking at the tapes, and we were watching your scene with you and Phoebe, and the scene with you and Phoebe came up, and you put your hand on your shoulder, and you gave this big puppy dog sign. And Steven saw it, and he went, oh my God, He's in love with her.
I don't need to see the more.
I don't need to see the rest of the tape, and I don't need to see anybody else, because this kid's not even going to be doing any acting. And he got up and he walked out of the room. And that's the long, long story about how I got the part in Gremlins.
That's incredible.
And it's a true story, which makes it even better.
Dude, so you get the full script, obviously.
Well, actually, here's the crazy thing. Let me just interrupt you here.
Sure.
They're like, so do you want to do the movie or not? I'm like, well, I'd love to read the script. They're like, no, you got to say yes or no. I said, wait a second. I got to say yes or no without reading the script? They're like, correct. And I was like, well, how do I know what I'm signing up for? They're like, you don't. But you do know it's a Spielberg movie, and he just did E.T., and it's the most successful movie of all time. He also did Close Encounters and Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark, so you know you're in good hands. And if you say no, there are 10,000 people behind you, starting with Emilio Estevez, that will say yes. And so I was like, guess I'm doing it. They're like, guess you are. So I basically signed on the dotted line, then got the script, and was like, oh my God, I get to do this, and I get to do this, and I get to buzz, and I get to kiss Phoebe, and I get to blow up the movie theater. Spoiler, I blow up the movie theater. And I was like so unbelievably pumped. And the crazy thing was I had 5, maybe 6 weeks before I even started shooting. So I had 5 weeks as a 19-year-old just to think about what you're going to do. It's like I couldn't sleep, bouncing around the room. I told my family thought I was making it up. People are freaking out. No one can understand this. It's like next level everything, and it's like I'd never been to California. I was from New York City. I'd never been west of the Mississippi. Well, that's not true. I went to Denver once, but so what? I'd never been to California. That's the really important thing. And I'd never been to Hollywood. And I can remember being on the plane, you know, taxiing in for LAX and seeing the Hollywood scene and Hollywood sign and going, wow, it's the Hollywood sign. But wait, it's the Hollywood sign, and I'm going to do a movie for, I don't know, Steven Spielberg. And I'm the lead, and I get to kiss Phoebe Cates. Did I mention I get to kiss Phoebe Cates?
I believe so. Okay, so you got the script at this point. You kind of know what's coming. When you start getting to set and you start seeing these incredible creatures that were designed by Chris Wallace, what was your reaction? Did it throw you? Were you worried about how you were going to portray a sense of realism and that likability and whimsy that we love that you created with Billy?
Well, I would say the first thing that happened was I went and I met everybody, and I went to Chris Walas's creature workshop, and I started my initial, dog training where I was bonding with Mushroom, the dog that plays Barney. Real name is Mushroom. Character name is Barney. So the first day that I went there, I did a read-through with Phoebe, and then I did about an hour of bonding with Mushroom where I would give him treats and everything like that, and throw the ball with him, and then we'd come up and kiss me in the face, and I would kiss him in the face, then he'd kiss me in the face, and I'd kiss him in the face, and we would love each other. And I did dog bonding every day for about 2 weeks before we shot the movie, to make sure that the dog would be basically all over me. And in fact, we kind of did the bonding too good. I'm jumping ahead, but in the Christmas scene where I get it for the first time, the dog's all over Gizmo and all over me and stepping on me and everything, because he was just so excited and so comfortable. But anyway, but as soon as I did all of those initial things, I went back. They had rented actually a place for me to stay in Los Angeles over by UCLA in Westwood on a place called Strathmore Drive. If you know your Westwood, then you know the little street I'm talking about, which also happened to be on Fraternity Row, which was fun because I got to hear Michael Jackson's Beat It every 10 minutes, every hour for 24 hours for the entire shooting of Gremlins. And Flashdance, What a Feeling. And a few other things, some of the songs just on constant repeat. Billie Jean. This is spring of 1983. So it was great, actually. So I'm at this. So I would go home to my to my apartment that they booked for me after the first couple of days, and I was just petrified. I was absolutely frozen with fear. I was like, I can't do this. I'm not a good enough actor to do this. I'm not even an actor. I'm like an imposter. I've had full-fledged imposter syndrome. they picked me over these people who are Matt Dillon and this and that or whatever. Like, I can't do this. Like, I've done one movie before, an after-school special where I got VD. How can they think that I can carry a Spielberg movie? And I would go to bed and I would wake up in a sweat going, I'm not going to be able to remember my lines. I'm going to be bad. Phoebe's not going to like me. She's not going to want to kiss me. And all of these terrible feelings like this. And I was like, the other part of me, you know, was like the devil and the angel on the shoulder. I was like, you can do this. You can't do this. You suck. You can do this. You're amazing. And I just had all of these mental battles going on about like, can I or can I? It wasn't like, I can do this Spielberg movie, no problem. Like, I was completely intimidated. So to this day, I don't really know how I did it other than like, I have to do it. Like, you gotta do it. So I would just wake up and I would go and I would try and spit my lines out and not be nervous. And actually, if you want to have fun tonight, you can go home and watch Gremlins. You can watch the very first scene we shot, because most of you know that movies are not shot in sequence, right? Sometimes you start with the final scene of the movie first. And then you go back and maybe you'll do the second scene in the movie on the last day. So it's very few movies are shot in sequence. The only ones that I know that are shot in sequence are like My Fair Lady was shot in sequence, and Mad Max Fury Road was shot in sequence. Probably a few others. So the first scene I had to do was Dick Miller coming out of Dory's Tavern, and he's all drunk and he's like, W-W-I-I, that scene. So luckily I only had one line in that, which I think was Mr. Futterman going home, you know? So I was like, I can handle one line. So I did that was fun. And then the next scene was again with Dick, because we wanted to do something called shooting him out, which is just, you take all the actors' scenes, because he was not available, and we're just gonna do all Dick's scenes the first 2 or 3 days. And then you can send him on his way and he can do other stuff. So we're gonna shoot Dick out, which sounds rude, but it actually was quite polite for Mr. Miller. So we shot him out, and my first real scene with lots of dialogue is the opening scene where you see me in the car, where my car won't start, and he's like, I haven't seen the cartoons with Smiling Abner, Little Abner, and Smiling Jack, that scene. And if you go back and you watch it, you can see that I'm actually sort of stuttering in the scene. I'm like, well, Mr. Futterman, you know, I can't, and it's not because I'm making choices, it's because I'm terrified. I'm terrified I'm going to make a mistake. I'm terrified I'm not going to remember my lines. I'm terrified that it's not going to go well. I'm terrified I'm going to get fired. And so eventually, after I got that first scene out of the way, I calmed down a little bit so that I could do a little bit of better performance. And just to put a good cap on this story, about 10 days into the shooting, I did some scene, can't remember which one, and I got up and I sat down and I still sort of went like, got through that one. I think it was the Mrs. Deagle and the dog and I'm so sorry, and he knocks the snowman's head onto the thing. And Judge Reinhold comes out and goes, you putz. Which was an ad-lib by Judge, by the way. Calling me a putz. So there was a lot of ad-libbing going on in the thing, and that was new for me too. Like, I was like, what's improvisation? You know, like, I didn't know what that was. I just learned my lines and spat them out. So I sat down on day 10, and I sit down and I went, and one of the grips comes over to me and he goes, hey man, what's going on, dude? You look like you're like a little stressed out. And I go, well, yeah, dude, you know, I'm like, I just want to do a great job, make everybody happy, and I just, you know, I don't want to get fired. And he goes, dude, you can't get fired. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, dude, I don't know if you know how movies work, but it's like $80,000 a day. You're on day 10, they've spent about $800,000. I don't think they can even afford to fire you right now, dude. They're stuck with you. And I go, they can't fire me? He goes, bro, they cannot fire you. I go, get the out of here. Are you kidding me? He goes, they cannot fire you, dude. You're set. Once you make it past like day 5 or 6, dude, you are set in stone, bro. They're stuck with you and Phoebe. He was like, score! And it was like I was Superman all of a sudden. I was like, I'm gonna do this scene now. They can't fire me. It's perfect. So I did the whole movie like that, and to my horror, the following year, they started a movie which I tried out for, called Back to the Future. And they start doing it with another actor whose name I shall not name, out of respect to him. And they do 6 weeks of shooting with him and fire him. So the dude who told me that was 100% wrong.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter because I was like, yeah, I'm unfireable. Superman, super Peltzers back on the set. And so I went and I did the rest of the movie with so much false confidence that I couldn't get fired. And of course they replaced this person with Michael J. Fox, and who went on and became huge, and it was like Michael J. Fox mania and everything like that. But I thought I was invulnerable because this grip came over and was like, dude, you got no problem, bro. I was like, why are you calling me a brassiere? Why are you calling me bra? He's like, no, dude, bra, like brother. I was, oh, sorry, I'm from New York City. I'd never heard bro, dude, bra, any of that until I came out to California. I was like, what language are you guys speaking? It's Spicoli.
So, you throw all that in there and your lack of confidence leading up to that point, and then you put in these creatures that you have to interact with. Sure. What are the mechanics of just working with those? I mean, there's times when you've got Gizmo in your backpack and it's still moving, and this is pre-CGI where they couldn't erase.
Remember those, buddy? Those were some tough ones, right? Yeah, they were tough.
So how was all that done, and how did you feel reacting to it all?
Well, I mean, so they were definitely in sort of the pre-production phase, which was really only about maybe 2 or 3 weeks that Phoebe and I had before we started shooting. And, you know, Chris Wallace, who basically, I mean, it's so funny because you have to sort of remember what my perspective was. I was 19, okay? So I was a sophomore at college, and, you know, and Chris Wallace is 28, so my feeling was like, wow, he's old, he's an adult, you know, he's 28, you know? And he just seemed so much more adult than myself, although Phoebe seemed quite adult too. Because, you know, she was like, do you know Andy Warhol? I was like, no. She's like, yeah, so Andy and I were at Xenon the other day in Studio 54, and I'm like, what's a Studio 54, you know? So she was so much more sophisticated, because she had been a model since she was like 15, and she had met all of these, like, you know, society people and stuff like that. I'm just a goofy kid, you know what I mean? And so Chris Wallace was like, so I'm going to kind of walk you through how we're going to do the Gizmo thing, because that's by far the most complicated. The gremlins are just going to be like operated by their people, and you just have to react normally to them and freak out and do what you're going to do as an actor. The Gizmo you're going to have a lot of interaction with, so we should probably focus on that. I'm like, absolutely. So he's like, we're going to do a combination of things depending on what the scene requires. So we put him in a backpack so you don't have to have him strapped to your body all the time. And I'm like, wait a second, strapped to my body? What do you mean? He goes, well, for the scenes where you have to hold him in your hand, we have all the cables coming out of his butt, and they had about 10 or 12 cables coming out right out of his tush. And they would come out, and each one of the cables would be attached to what could only be described as a joystick. And I said, so what are the joysticks for? And he goes, well, here, we'll give you a little demonstration. So all of his, you know, people he'd hired, that sort of, I guess you'd call them puppeteers, they'd each grab a joystick, and like one person would do the joystick, and one person would be doing the arms, so one person would be doing the eyes, one person would be doing the nose, one person would be doing the ears, and they broke it down into like facial and body parts. And they had been practicing for weeks to make it move as one, so that it looked like a realistic puppet. Now, remember, he didn't talk. There was no Howie Mandel. That hadn't been cast yet. By the way, spoiler, Howie Mandel is the voice of Gizmo. Also, fun fact, never met Howie Mandel to this day. Spoken to him on Twitter, but like I do my thing, and he goes and does his thing in the voice booth months after the movie's over, and never met the dude. How is that possible? It's so bizarre. People are always like, what's Howie like? I'm like, your guess is as good as mine. The only time I've ever communicated with him was this year after we did the Mountain Dew commercial together. And we sort of communicated to each other on Twitter. But I still have never met the man, never shaken his hand. Probably not a big odds of that happening. I just thought I'd throw that in there, it's kind of funny. And yeah, so anyway, getting back to the effects, he's like, so a lot of times you have him in the backpack, that'll be remote control, so we'll just be remote controlling him there. And then sometimes there'll be things where you'll pick him up from one table and you'll put him down on another, and we can just use like, it was like kind of like a gizmo that just sort of moved like this, like it squirmed a little bit, almost like really this toy does. And that's all you need was a little sensation of movement to show that it's a live creature to take him from one table to the other. He goes, but the real problem is going to be when you have to hold him in his hands and interact with him. And I go, okay. And he goes, so the cables, we can't see them. So you're going to have to hold him in his hands, and we've spoken to the costume and wardrobe designer, and you're going to have to wear long sleeve shirts, which is fine since it takes place at Christmas, it's winter and it's cold, and everything like that. But the cables are going to come out, and they're going to go down your sleeve, and we're going to attach the cables, we're going to tape them to your body. And they're going to go run down the length of your body, and they're going to come down to about your ankle, and then we'll cut a hole in your sock, and the cables will come across the room to the 12 people who are controlling Gizmo. So if you go back, here's another fun thing you can do when you rewatch Gremlins tonight, hopefully, which you will, or if you happen to see it again, you'll notice that they never shoot me from the waist down when I'm with Gizmo. And that's because if you saw what was happening from the waist down is I've got Gizmo and I'm standing here and I'm walking and the cables are coming out the floor and I'm trailing 12 people behind me who are walking like this with the joystick crouching down under my waist going like this. Following me, watching a monitor there that's showing me Gizmo and I'm talking to him and rubbing his head and they're going, react, do the nose thing, do the nose thing. Except there's only one of me and there's 12 of them walking behind me. And as they do the joysticks and the cables, you know, I'm not a particularly hairy person, but I do have some hairs on my body. And there were little separations between the cables. Every time they would pull the joystick, the cable would close the separation on my flesh and on the little tiny hairs that run up and down my body from my entire body. So I'd be going, so Giz, let's go over to the table the first couple of times. I'm like, because we have to. And I'm like, Chris, I'm getting pinched like mad from these cables. He's like, pretty much. So it took a while to kind of filter out the agony that I was going through when they did particularly violent reactions for Gizmo, you know? There'd be times when I'd be like, do I really have to scratch his head? Because I knew I was gonna get pinched down here. So it was wild. But so there was no voices or anything like that, but there were mechanical sounds that Gizmo would make. So he'd be there and he'd be like, hey buddy, how you doing? And scratch his head and he'd be like, and he'd be like, oh, you like that, huh? Let me scratch your head again. And Chris Waves would be like, I want you to improv as much as possible. I'm like, there's that word again. And he's like, whatever you want to do, just treat it like it's an actual animal and it's an actual pet. You want to touch him on the nose, touch him on the nose. We'll react. You want to scratch his head, it's fine. You want to pick him up and cuddle him, you can pick him up and cuddle him. Just don't show the wires. So I was like, okay. So I felt free to do stuff, and quite honestly, the Gizmo was so good that after a while, I just felt like he was my pet. Yeah, I mean, it looked exactly like an animal, smelled kind of like glue, and that, it was very, very lifelike. And of course, there were also hilarious things that happened that I had no idea about that they didn't prepare me for. And I tell this story and everybody freaks out, but like, so we had to work very fast and we had to do multiple takes. And my acting had to be really on point because if there was a good Gizmo take and a bad Billy take, they were going to take the good Gizmo take. They didn't care about my performance. So like, he's the star of the movie. It's called Gremlins. As Joe Dante said to me one time, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but the name of the movie is not Billy Peltzer's Adventures in Kingston Falls. The title of the movie is Gremlins. So they're going to be the focus. I was like, got it.
So now you're acting with Gizmo and the Gremlins and Stride. And of course, you have this fantastic supporting cast. And you have Corey Feldman, Jonathan Banks shows up. Now, what was the scene where you just figured it out and said, wow, we are actually capturing magic. This is something special?
Wow, that's a good question. I think everybody, as difficult as it was, because there was a lot of problems that happened during it, but the scene where I get Gizmo as a Christmas present, you know, and then they lower the lights, and I open it up for the first time, and he goes, he comes out of the box with his little paws, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, and the dog is freaking out. And if you watch the movie closely, the dog licks Gizmo's ear, because the dog is convinced that Gizmo is a real creature. I mean, the dog was 100% convinced, which we all took as a very good sign. So we thought to ourselves, we can fool an animal with as keen a sense as a dog into thinking that Gizmo was actually alive. We think we really got, you know, something here. And then on that day, Gizmo was working really, really well. Because sometimes he would break down, and you know, I'd be doing a scene with him, and he'd be like, and his head would snap off, and you'd be like, okay, I think we've got a problem here. You know? And then Chris would come over, and he'd be like, oh dear, oh gosh, oh my, stressing out, and Joe would be sitting in his chair. Joe never ever got upset about anything. He'd be like, what are we looking at here? And he's like, oh gosh, his head, I don't know. He's like, just give me hours, Wayless. What are we looking at? He's like, I don't know, 4.5, 5-hour break, everybody. And then they'd sew Gizmo's head back on or whatever they had to do. So on this particular day, the dog got so excited, he stepped on Gizmo in the box and ripped Gizmo's ear off of his head. So he ripped his ear off his head. You can see all the little sprockets and, you know, cogs and things inside that. And Chris came over and did his usual, oh no, oh dear. Wayless, what are we looking at? 8 hours, 8 hours. So there was an 8-hour break in that scene. So half the scene was shot in the morning, and half the scene was shot probably about 5 or 6 or 7 p.m. right before we were breaking. And it was all split up. And for 8 hours, I had nothing to do. So
Play video games.
Corey Feldman, who was 11, went over to Spielberg's office, which was about 2 blocks away from the stage.
Millipede, food fight.
Left around the corner, and Steven had pole position, food fight, Millipede, and Ms. Pac-Man, I think, in his office. Full-size arcade games. He was away doing Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So basically, I spent most of Gremlins kicking Corey Feldman's ass at food fight. I was like, you're 11, you can't play this game. I just saw him last weekend at Steel City Con in Pittsburgh. I was like, how you doing at food fight? He's like, why won't you let that go?
So here at the Boo Crew, we love screen use props. So I have to ask about this. Did they let you keep anything from the production?
Well, you know, it's interesting because, yeah, I managed to keep a couple of props.
Sword.
Like the sword that I cut the Gremlin's head off, spoiler.
Baseball bat.
And then also
Shoot a
the
baseball
bat from the chainsaw scene where I'm attempting to fend Stripe off with the chainsaw. So I kept a couple of those things. But the thing that was really amazing about it, especially when we did Gremlins 2, was by Gremlins 2, I had gotten, you know, more successful and actually started making some money and you know, I'm from Manhattan, didn't know how to drive a car. All through Gremlins, I'm in Westwood, and the reason why they put me in Westwood is like, kid doesn't have his license, from Manhattan, takes the subway, doesn't know how to drive a car, he can at least walk down to the shops in Westwood and, you know, go to AMA Falafel and La Monica's Pizza, Broxton, and all those places that I went to a billion times because I couldn't cook and I couldn't eat and I couldn't drive. So, although Phoebe had a white Toyota Cressida that she rented, that she would take me around and we would go to movies together and stuff like that. Go down to the Bruin in Westwood and all of those theaters. They're still there, Westwood Plaza, all those Westwood stuff still there 38 years later. Don't even know where I am. Where am I? What was I saying?
About the car.
What props? Thank you. And so now it's Gremlins 2 and I managed to get a car. And every day that I left the Warner Brothers studio lot,
Pop the trunk.
Security would go, hi, Mr. Galligan, can you pop your trunk, please? And I was like, why? They're like, to make sure that you're not stealing any Gremlins. I was like, what? You guys are hilarious. They're like, Mr. Galligan, can you pop your trunk, please? It's like, you serious? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I pop my trunk and there's nothing in it except a tire iron and some beach towels or something like that. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be like rude here or anything, but you do know that I'm like an actor, like in the movie Gremlins 2. They're like, "Oh, we're aware, Mr. Galligan. That's why we want you to pop your trunk." And I'm like, "Why?" They're like, "Because you have opportunity."
You got the most access to it.
I said, "Opportunity to what? Steal them?" And then they're like, "Precisely." They're about $75,000 a piece, so we have to check everybody associated with the production's trunk to make sure they're not lifting gremlins, including yours. So for every day, over 100 days of shooting Gremlins 2, I almost said Gremlins 3 reflexively, because people ask me about it all the time. But after 100 days of shooting, or 95 days of shooting Gremlins 2, they still are like, "Mr. Galligan, have a great day, pop your trunk." And I would pop my trunk every single day to make sure there wasn't lifting gremlins, because apparently they were super nervous about, there were hundreds of gremlins made for Gremlins 2, and dozens of mogwais, and all sort of, you had Rick Baker also mass producing all of these things and doing incredible technological things with them. And it was all super expensive effects. So it was real tough. I had to ask, like, can I have the sword? Can I have this on the first production? Can I take this Daniel Clamp book off the second production? Can I take Phoebe home with me? I'm joking. She was married to Kevin Kline by then. I'm just kidding.
Well, when you got to Gremlins 2 and Rick Baker, as you said, came on board and really revolutionized practical effects with a lot of the work that he did on that movie, how the hell did he do that brain gremlin?
Well, I've said this many times before. I've even said it to Rick's face. I think he's the Leonardo da Vinci and the Michelangelo of effects and effects makeup. I think he may be the greatest person in movie history at what he did. And he may even be better than, like, you could take Brando or whoever you think is the best actor, Meryl Streep, who you think is the best actor of all time. He's probably better at what he did than any actor who's ever been good at what they did in their craft. I mean, he's just, until you meet him and you can see what he does so easily, and you sit down and do a sketch of you in 10 minutes, and it's like, you just can't even, this guy is so talented. Hey, he's only won, 7 Oscars out of 12 tries. You have to stop and think about that. 7 Oscars. They had to create a category for this dude in 1981 when he did American Werewolf in London. They're like, "What do we nominate him for?" "There's no category." "Well, make a category, damn it!" Look what he did. The guy turned to a werewolf. Wasn't that you, Zach, in American Werewolf in London? No, that was David Naughton. Thank you. We look very similar. People come up to me, they're like, "I love you in American Werewolf in London." I'm like, "Thank you so much, David Naughton." I've signed tons of people's other autographs just because you don't want to make fans feel bad. "Loved you in Fright Night, William Ragsdale." I saw Billy Ragsdale about 2 months ago, and I actually technically replaced him in Biloxi Blues because it was Matthew, William Ragsdale, and myself. And so I saw Billy, I was like, "Hey Billy, I hope you don't mind, I've signed your name about 13 times. He's like, "I've signed yours too, buddy." People come up to me like, "Gremlins is one of my favorite films." He's like, "Thank you very much." It's the same thing I do. Just say thank you, move right on.
So the actual mechanics of the brain gremlin.
The actual mechanics of the brain gremlins. I'm sorry, I missed your tangent. I'm tangenting over here and I'm tangenting over there. So, again, you have to just be reminded about, the time. We're talking summer of 1989. So there's no internet to speak of. There's no home computers. There's hardly any software really to speak of. The internet really doesn't come into being for mass people in the .com era. It's like late 90s, 96, 97, 98, somewhere around there. So Rick comes up to me, and working with Rick is arguably one of the most surreal things, because I was like, at 14, I was a nerdy kid who read Famous Monsters of Filmland and Starlog and all those nerdy effects magazines. So like, Rick Baker, genius, the incredible melting man. Rick Baker doing this, that, and da-da-da. Rick Baker doing this, the new Planet of the Apes, or whatever he's doing. Because, ape makeup. Oh, King Kong, right? He did the Jessica Lange, the Dino De Laurentiis, Jeff Bridges' King Kong in 1976, where it got nominated for an Oscar or something like that. So he just done so many things that I had grown up looking at. So now I'm working with him. So that's insane. And he comes up and he goes, "So brain gremlin, yeah, you don't really have to worry about that. You know, if you have scenes with him, you interact with him, just let him go. And I go, okay, so how are you going to do the speech, though? He goes, you want to come and see it? I'll show you how we do it. I go, oh my God, I want to come and see it. So what they did was, they got this actor from The Odd Couple named Tony Randall to do the brain gremlin's voice. And they pre-recorded all of his vocals. So Tony Randall was done. He was done before anybody in Gremlins 2. And Rick goes, so here's what we do. We take the recorded voice, and it's broken down into you know, a kind of a code. And I'm like binary code? He's like, no, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We break it down into the code, and we feed it into this computer program here. And I was like, I'm literally like, computer program? Like, I sort of know what it is, but don't really know what it is. Because it goes into the program, and then it goes into the animatronics here. And we have about 117 different wires. And the wires go up to the brain gremlin's face. And we have about 57 different facial expression combinations that the brain gremlin can make. I go, for what? He goes, well, for the syllables. So like if it's gonna go A, then his face goes A, and his face goes ah, his face is gonna go ah, and et cetera, for all the phonetic alphabet. And he goes, and we feed the pre-recorded stuff in, and it just does the program, and it moves the cables, and it makes its mouth work perfectly, except there's a 3-second delay. But it's no problem, because we just go back, and then we move in 3 seconds, and we put it in front of the voice, and when you play it back, it's perfect. So I'm like, can I see a demonstration? He's like, yeah, sure. So he's like, civilized? Certainly not civilized, and this and that. And the thing is doing it right in front of me. The brain gremlin is going, civilized? Certainly not civilized. Fun, but definitely not civilized. And I go, that's like magic. That's like the craziest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, you're going to win the Oscar for that. He's like, the thing about Rick is he's like the greatest person ever, and he's just sort of like, I don't know how good it is, you know? Yeah, maybe. He's just like the most relaxed person about his talent ever. It's like Leonardo da Vinci going, you know, I'm not sure, the Mona Lisa's smile, it's a little off to me. You know, he's like that. So when you see the movie, what you see is exactly what was on the set, just with the sound move 3 seconds over, so that it's synced perfectly. Still one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen. And of course now, with today's effects, you go, oh, they just made the gremlin move, they did CGI and this and that. And I'm like, no, that's about 5 months of work to make the brain gremlin work.
So all that said, what do you think of the resurgence of gremlins actually generating new content based on the world? You were in that Mountain Dew commercial this year, which was amazing to see you in. There's an animated series, The Secrets of the Mogwai, in play. They just got renewed for a season 2, and season 1 hasn't premiered yet. What do you think, what do you make of all this? What do you think brought it on, and what do you think it means for the future of the franchise?
Well, I know what I'm hoping it means. Kids, what are you hoping it means? Gremlins 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to make it to 4, 5, and 6, and 7, though. It'll probably kill me off. But I'll do Gremlins 3 with you. So, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is Warner Brothers is sinking a ginormous amount of money into the Gremlins Secrets of the Mogwai animated series. And all I can tell you is if there's any one of you that's sitting there that has any desire to see a third Gremlins movie, you have to support that series as if your life depended on it. You're like, hey mom, I'm going out for a jog. Put the series on in the background before you leave and go out for a jog. Just put it on, you don't have to watch it. Just turn it on. Just have your Secrets of the Mogwai thing running 24/7 all the time so that the ratings are good. You know, it's actually not Netflix, it's HBO Max and the Cartoon Network. But you want HBO Max, which is essentially Warner Brothers, to go, look at these numbers, they're astounding. Go out, buy more stuff. You just have to support the franchise. And if you do that, even, my guess is even moderately, you'll probably have a Gremlins 3 in something like the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, we might have time for 1 or 2 audience questions if we can.
By the way, have you been in contact with Phoebe about this? I mean, just the possibility that if it happens, like, hey, if I'm in, are you in?
Well, here's the thing. So Phoebe, wow, the lights are coming up. Gizmo. Back here, buddy. I got you. So here's the thing about Phoebe. Phoebe's married to Kevin Kline, and she lives in New York City. She hasn't done a movie in 20 years. She did one small part in her best friend Jennifer Jason Leigh's movie, The Anniversary Party, but other than that, the last movie I think she did was what, Drop Dead Fred? Was that the last one?
Princess Caribou.
Princess Caribou, thank you, JD. JD's always down there to correct things when I forget them. So she did Princess Caribou. And she's married to Kevin Kline. She's got 2 kids. She has a beautiful store. She loves it when I plug her store. The Blue Tree on 89th and Madison sells, shall we say, upper-end home furnishings. They're quite expensive and quite beautiful and super high quality. And her store does incredibly well. And let's just say she has no need to ever work again. So she has no interest, desire. She did acting. She's very proud of what she did. I don't think she feels any negative things towards it. She just has no desire to do it ever again. So my guess is, I mean, we've offered her so many times just to do like behind the scenes at Gremlins, you know, how did Gizmo work, etc. All of this stuff. We've offered to come to, or they've offered to come to her store and do something, and she just doesn't really have any interest in it whatsoever. So I suppose there's a possibility that she could do Gremlins 3, but I don't think that would happen. If you ask me, I would say there's probably a 90%, 95% possibility that I would be like a single dad with a kid in Gremlins 3 or hello, Kate Beckinsale, you know what I mean? Or they'd replace her or something like that, you know what I mean? So I think there's much more of the likelihood of that happening than her coming back.
Do we have time for one audience question, or do we gotta wrap? I think we got time for one audience question. If anyone out there wants
anyone want us to spring one? JD, of course you're gonna do it. JD,
Yeah.
you always ask questions. Let's give something
over there.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Back there?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Can I have him sign my Gizmo?
Kids, you want to sign one of those? It's a little small for his fingers, but I could probably make it work.
That'll be a request.
He only has 3 fingers.
Any other
so-
questions? Down here.
I know this is the Gremlins panel, but can you talk about Waxworks? It's one of the greatest.
That's true. Real quick on Waxworks.
Real quick on Waxwork. So, I mean, probably the best story about Waxwork was that I had absolutely no interest in doing the movie, and they sent the script to me, and I read it, and the director, Tony Hickox, you know, he's British for London, you know, and speaks of this, and basically I read the script, and it was supposed to be 5 or 6, right, 6 kids in LA, and the script read like, oh, don't get hit by the lorry, shall we go in the lift, or should we go stop and get some petrol? And I'm like, wait a second, LA kids don't talk, this is the way English people speak. LA kids don't speak like this, I can't do this movie, the dialogue's terrible. Don't worry, I've told Tony this story a million times. So I went, he's like, Tony still wants to meet you, and he wants to meet you at a restaurant called Hugo's on Santa Monica, which I believe is still there. So I went and met him as a courtesy to say, listen, I really appreciate the interest in everything like this, but I have no interest here. And you have a really creative story, but I have to politely decline. And I wasn't going to tell him why, because the dialogue was like just terrible. So I went and I met him, and he's like, I'm a huge, massive Gremlins fan, I would love you to do the film, blah, 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 blah. He goes, by the way, do you have any problems with the film? And I'm like, I have done this before in the past, I've been honest, I've been burned badly by being honest. And I was like, no, I don't think so. He's like, you seem a bit hesitant there. Is there anything that we can do and fix to make you more comfortable? And I was like, well, I'm not gonna do the movie anyway, you know, whatever. So I said, well, I try and be honest all the time. I gotta tell you, the dialogue just does not sound to me like LA kids or New York kids or American kids whatsoever at all talking. And it's like, I can't say these words. And if I can't say these words, how am I gonna do the movie? He goes, well, that's simple. You just change it. Anything you want to change, you can change. I said, well, what about the other characters? You can change the other characters too. I said, so I can basically make the dialogue, you can make the dialogue sound like anything you want. What's your other problem? And I go, well, there's also the matter of like, I don't really have anywhere, you know, to stay because I just moved back to New York and everything. You can stay at my friend's house in Bel Air. What's your next problem? So now I'm going like, oh my, like, what do I say? I'm like, well, I don't really know if there's this, that, or the other thing fixed. What's your next problem? Well, I'm not sure if I get it fixed. And I ran out of problems. And he goes, congratulations, welcome aboard. And I left and walked out. The agent was, did he take it well? And I said, well, apparently I'm doing the movie. And the agent was like, what? Thought you were going there to turn it down. I said, I thought I was too. But I start rehearsal and shooting next week. The guy could sell anything to anybody. And he just, so any problem I had, he found a solution for it. So I was like, guess I'm doing it. And that's how I ended up doing Waxwork. Because Tony Hickok, which is such, he was like, I want this guy, and whatever he needs, I'm gonna give this guy what he needs. And that's how I ended up doing it. But I went there completely just determined to say, I'm not doing this movie.
Unbelievable. Well, Zach, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with all of us today. We're getting to wrap up. So you got to come back and do the Boo Crew. We'll talk more about. We got to do a whole Waxwork episode.
Just got started, yeah.
Right?
Now it's over.
Exactly.
I feel like I just got to know you, folks, and now it's done.
Well, thank you guys, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jack. Come to the table. Say hi to me and Gizmo. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.